And this time the print here should be, and we're printing only the confirmed cases, which is for, let's see how many. This is 445,229,000. So let me quickly double check that number. That kind of matches our report here that we are getting on the API. So the information we are getting is correct. It means our decoding to a total data object was successful. So one thing done and two to go. So we need two more functions in order to fetch the remaining data. I'm going to copy this one because many things are similar, just for sake of saving some time. And the second function, we want to get all the regions, right? So let's rename the function, say fetch all regions. And again, we have completion, but this time we are going to return not total data, but our country object. So we need to create another data object so we can decode everything. Let's go to our regions and let's run the endpoint here just to see what we are getting. Again, we have a top level thing called data, which includes an array of, we have around 229, I think, countries. So each part, the small part is going to be a country, and then we will have like a region, which will decode on top level. That will be an array of all these countries. So let's select our total data here, Command N, Swift file, call this region, and it will have a struct all regions. This confirms to codable, and it will have a data. Again, the key is very important. It's going to be an array of country object, which we don't have, but we can say struct country conforms to codable, and then we will have let ISO string and let name string. So if I go back to my API again, you will see that each country has an ISO and a name, and both of them are returning a string value. So we'll have the regions, and then we have this struct, which is our country. Let's get back to our API service, and here, instead of doing our total data, we are going to return an array, very important, not one, but array of country objects. All right. Then we move on to our URL. This is going to be not total data, total URL string, but we call this country, actually countries URL string. So we have our base URL, but we need to change the additional part. This again we can get from our API here. So if I go to the code here, you can see the part from base URL, we have a / and it says regions. So I'm going to copy that and paste it here. And we need only one / So this will be our URL. I'm just going to copy and paste since we have renamed the variable here. So we create our URL here, and then we can move with our, again, simple check. If something goes wrong, we just say incorrect URL and exit the function. We're creating a request. It's a GET request with the headers. Create a session and call the session. So the only thing we changed here was the URL and the type that we are going to return an array of countries. Now, inside our data task, Again, if there was an error, we are exiting with our completion and provide the error. I'm going to comment out this part and uncomment this so we can again test the data. In this case, again, we are creating this, converting into JSON our data, so we should be able to print all the countries. So let's go to our content view, because now we want to call another function, not fetch total data, but fetch all regions. And the result basically it's same, but we are not getting total data here. So just comment out this switch statement. We are not interested in it yet. Command R to run. And let's see what we are getting here. It's going to be a pretty long list. So if you just scroll all the way to the top, you will see that we have this data, and then it has separate countries with ISO and the name of all the countries. So the data we are receiving is matching the results here. It means that our call is working properly. So the next step would be converting everything into an array of countries and sending it back. So I'm commenting out this test part and uncommenting this. So again, we use a decoder, and we needed to catch block here. I'm going to rename total data object into all countries. And this will decode into, and this is going to be all regions, self from data, and completion. Now we say all countries data, which if we go to our region, you will see that all countries data is an array of country objects. So if we go back to our API service here, this should have no more errors because we are providing an array of country objects as we have promised. So quickly jumping to our result here, I can say all countries, and let's actually print how many all countries includes in the array. So we just count how many objects it has. And if everything goes correctly and decoding works, we printed that we have 217 countries decoded. Let me quickly check the results here. It had 217 items inside our array, our dictionary there. So everything was decoded successfully. So we have access to all the countries we wanted. Another function is done. So we move to the third and final one that is going to be used in our API service. Again, I'm going to copy the function itself. And this time we are going to fetch the report. And remember, for our report, if we quickly jump back to our API, we have the report. Here, we need to provide at least one parameter. And this is our ISO. We choose to go with ISO. Basically, our country has a name and ISO. We are going to search by ISO. And we need to also copy the URL from here. So I'm going to copy the second part of our URL, which we are going to add to our base URL. But our function, let's start from renaming the function. We say fetch report, and then we need to say for ISO, and we pass a string here, which is going to be our ISO. And then we have our completion handler. It's not going to return countries, but we will get there. Since I have copied my URL endpoint here, I'm going to replace it, / don't forget. And the value which was hard-coded there, in our case it was Bulgaria, I'm going to pass my ISO here. So use string interpolation, and whatever the ISO is, we just pass it here. So this will be our base URL plus the endpoint. I'm going to rename these to not countries, but reports. URL and rename this as well. So this part is okay. Now let's take care of the data type that we are going to use. So I'm going to select my region, Command N, new Swift file, and this is going to be report, the file name. And again, we need to quickly jump to our report to see what we are getting from our API. So let's keep the Bulgaria, use the endpoint and result. So the top level is data. Then we have inside is the information about the country, current stats, which is date, confirmed cases, etc. And finally, we have something called region, which actually provides the country name and the province name itself. So we will have three things here, not two. So we need three structs to decode the object we need. I'll have struct all reports. It conforms to codable. And we will have let data. And it's going to be returning array of region reports. And the reason we are returning an array is because, as you saw, some countries, big countries, they have an array of provinces or republics or states that are returned. So we want to get an array of these provinces or republics. And in case if there are no, it's not a big country and it's only valued as one province, anyway, it's going to be array with just one object inside. So I'm going to put an array here, but we don't have anything to call it yet because I didn't create my struct yet. So it's going to be region report. Again, conforms to codable, and the array is going to return a region report. So our data, let's jump to our code here again, will have an array of region reports. So this one has only one item. It may be 50 or it may be 10, it doesn't matter. All right, so our region report will have information that is this part. So these are the variables you can assign to your region report that will be decoded. Again, we don't need all of them, not only few of them. I'm going to create one ID because we need to this in order to easily use it with our data structure. And this is not going to come from our API because if you look closely, there is no ID parameter. So this is going to be a UUID that is going to be generated every time we create a report, region report. So I will also confirm this to identifiable because it has an ID. We can easily identify each region will have its unique ID. This is where the UUID comes in. Then we want to get the date, which is a type of date. But if you had paid attention, the date we are going to receive is a string. So we need to decode this into a date object because I don't know what about you, but this format is not very user-friendly for me at least, because I would prefer to have different format of the date. So we are going to do this different for each user depending on the region they live. So we will have a date, then we have let confirmed is integer, then we have the deaths, again a good practice would be to copy each one that you are using so like you don't make any typos. Death, then we have the active is int, the fatality rate is double.